Hello, my name is Pamela West, and on behalf of SNS Worldwide, I would like to welcome you to this video presentation on the use of crafts in occupational therapy. Some of you will be widely familiar with the roles crafts can play in therapy, while to others, this video will be full of completely new ideas. In either case, for the next half hour, we'll explore innovative new ways in which cognitive disabilities can be diagnosed, measured, and understood through the use of crafts. Today, the practice of medicine looks very technical and seems to grow more dependent on advanced medical machinery. So we may rightly ask, why do occupational therapists persist in the use of crafts when other areas of patient care and rehabilitation are so reliant on advanced technologies? With us today to answer these and other questions is Claudia Allen, a leading occupational therapist who has written and researched extensively on the use of crafts in occupational therapy. Claudia is on the faculty of USC and is the chief of occupational therapy at the medical center there. Claudia has received international recognition on her work in explaining cognitive disabilities and their effect on daily living. Hello, Claudia.
Hi.
Thank you for being with us today. You know, you must take a lot of teasing about the way these craft projects look. You know, I always thought that crafts were primarily used in the hospital to keep patients busy while they were recovering. I mean, how do you rely on this to be anything more than busy work?
Well, the bottom line is that we use crafts to predict how a disabled person is going to be able to function safely in the community.
From simply assembling crafts to foretelling safety in the community? That seems like a rather large leap in logic. I mean, after all, crafts are used in a supervised setting in the hospital. How can you predict how a patient will do when he or she is alone at home from this?
Well, that's a very good question. And of course, the best way to predict is to watch actual performance in the community. But from a hospital setting, we have a bit of a catch-22 operating. We don't want somebody to be discharged from the hospital and go home or back to work until they're ready. So we have to come up with other methods of predicting how well a person is going to be able to function.
It seems like a very touchy area.
It is. And one of the first questions that people ask when they get into the hospital is, when can I get out of here? When can I go back to work? When can I go home? And answering those questions from a hospital setting can get very complicated. Basically, we try to answer those questions as fairly and objectively as we can.
I see. Since you're concerned with the cognitively disabled, are you constantly evaluating the quality of thought? How can one be objective about that?
Well, we focus on the activities that they intend to do when they get out of the hospital. And our major question is, can this person do that activity safely?
Well, can you give me an example?
Okay, let's keep it simple for starters. Let's take somebody who wants to live alone in their own apartment. Most people have a set routine for doing their chores around the house. One can ask the person what they intend to do.
Well, what if one intends to have a dirty apartment?
Right, that happens. And in a free society, we have a right to have a dirty apartment, which is as it should be. However, the neighbors have a right to complain about any fire and safety hazards. And that's why we focus on safety.
But basic household activities, I mean, as important as they are, still can't equal the daily problems, the serious hazards that an individual might face, I mean, even in the comfort of his own home. I mean, household poisons, fire safety, climbing stairs, all of these come to mind.
Oh, you're absolutely right.
And there's so many differences in the way the average person would identify and deal with these hazards.
This is true, and a hospital has to protect patients as well, so we can't expose them to any fire or safety hazards. We need a way of predicting a patient's response to a hazard without taking a risk. And that's where crafts come in.
So you're saying that crafts not only predict an individual's ability to perform a simple task, but that therapists can also use crafts to predict an individual's ability to analyze or solve or maybe even avoid a serious hazard?
That's right.
Can you elaborate on this for us?
Sure. A person's response to a safety hazard is really the result of a thought process. The stimulus is usually an unexpected change in the environment. The thought process is problem solving. What am I going to do to solve this problem? When a person has lost some of their mental faculties, we want to know what it means in terms of their ability to solve new problems. New problems can be solved without risk while doing a craft project.
That's very interesting, but I think I'd have a problem with someone like my father who would not be interested in working on a craft project.
That can be, and we see patients who share your father's disinterest in crafts. Sometimes they'll agree to come and try a project when we explain that as a part of our evaluation to see if they're improving or not. And that's where S&S comes in. S&S has worked with us in developing craft projects that are very sensitive to this method of evaluation. They're also, as a mail order company, very handy for therapists because they make all of these projects available to everyone, and in that sense, we can begin to standardize our evaluation. Plus, they do all of this prep and save therapists hours and hours. So you can see some nice collaboration is developing between therapists and the company.
What if there's no way to get a patient to do a craft project?
Well, then sometimes we can get people to do some work projects for the hospital, some real work that needs to be done. And if they won't try that, we can then try some grooming and self-care projects. The truth is that the worst scenario does happen. We find some patients who will not try to do anything new.
Well, what do you do then?
There isn't a lot we can do. If they won't try anything new, we can't evaluate new problem-solving ability.
Well, how often does a person do new problem solving?
Far more often than you think until you lose the ability to do it.
And how does one go about organizing these problems?
Well, after working with psychiatric patients for a long time, we finally organized them into 6 cognitive levels.
Only 6?
Well, to make it simple, we'll stick to the 6 major levels.
Well, I guess it's time to get out the pencils.
From your questions, I can tell that you are probably functioning at least at 6.4. That's near the top of the scale, which means that you could use 3 or 4 abstract variables during a reasoning process. The very top of the scale is 6.6, and that's using 7 variables during an abstract reasoning process, and I think it's fairly safe that we seldom, if ever, function that high. But that is the limit, so psychologists tell me, of the human brain.
So the scale is not designed to measure creativity or intellect or genius?
Nothing like that.
Oh, okay.
We are only interested in how people solve problems in the ordinary activities of daily life.
So specifically new problem-solving abilities.
That's right. You've got it.
Okay. So now can you show me what normal problem-solving abilities look like?
I'll give it a shot.
Okay.
First, though, I'd like to introduce you to Kathy Earhart, who is a master clinician. She's going to demonstrate what normal problem solving looks like and also pantomime what disabled problem solving looks like.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks
How
for
do you
being
do?
with us today.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Pleasure. How did you develop this pantomiming ability of yours? Did you take acting lessons or something like that?
Actually, no. I took art lessons. I used to be an art student. And I especially enjoyed doing line drawings and caricatures of people in order to capture their unique qualities. And I think this skill has allowed me to be observant of disabled people and to capture their unique qualities through pantomime.
Now, why do you use a mime to demonstrate patient behavior? I mean, why not just bring in a few patients and let us see them actually work with the crafts?
Actually, having Kathy here is a very valuable asset because she can show us fairly quickly and efficiently what would take a therapist many hours to collect.
So I take it you've worked with and observed cognitively disabled patients extensively?
Yes.
And you understand how the cognitive disability scale functions?
Right.
Okay.
Actually, we've used the cognitive disability scale in our clinic for years, trying to understand our patients' behavior, and it has been very helpful in terms of that.
Now, can you show me what normal problem-solving ability looks like to you?
Okay,
Okay.
I'd be happy to. I think perhaps it would be easiest for me first to illustrate one characteristic of normal problem solving by having me do a simple task such as cutting out this unusual shape, which is a turtle. The notable thing about people who have normal problem solving ability is the ease with which they work with material objects. As you watch me work, you'll notice that I'm able to talk, and if I could sing, and I might think about other things that I'm going to do later on this evening as I work. But still, it doesn't seem to slow me down. If you watch my hands especially carefully, you'll notice too that I'm making almost a continuous, spontaneous series of adjustments as I move around this line, both with my tool and with the way I'm holding the fabric, as well as how I'm coordinating the use of both of my hands. And these things are to get a better effect. And these motor adjustments that I'm making are really problem-solving maneuvers, and they're being done very automatically and effortlessly as I work. And this is really one of the things that you'll notice with normal problem-solving ability. Voila. A second characteristic of normal problem solving is the capacity to plan ahead. That is, to think about what's going to happen when you do so-and-so before you actually do it. And this kind of a process we are able to observe in a craft such as this here. This is a magazine rack from S&S, and it's fully assembled. And you can see that it has dowels here in the side so the magazines can fit on either side. The beauty of this kind of a project is that it allows us to view a person's ability to plan ahead. And this partially assembled kit has been put together in the wrong order. What the person did here was place the side pieces onto the bottom with the slats and nail it before they put in the dowels. And so when it came to the point where they needed to put in the dowels, they had a bit of a problem. It wouldn't work. And the only way to remedy this problem is to completely take off the top and disassemble the sides and to fix it. Now, a person who has normal problem-solving capability is apt to not make this sort of error. They're going to be thinking about the process of assembly and the most efficient way to get that done before they begin to make an error like this. The ability to plan out your actions is, as you can imagine, very important capacity. People who can't do that in the community find themselves in situations where they're doing unsafe and potentially hazardous things. We can look at a person's ability to plan in a craft such as this and generalize that ability to the activities in the community.
Let's take an example that's precious to people living in LA, driving a car. At any given moment while driving a car, you may have to pop up to level 6. The disabled, however, always want to drive, and if they get into trouble, the consequences can be serious. In point of fact, any traveling around in the community can get dangerous very quickly, and the ordinary citizen is expected to use some problem-solving ability in order to stay out of trouble. Even watching TV in the comfort of your own home can have some unpredictable and difficult consequences. The flip side of living in this advanced technological society of ours is that we are all expected to solve a lot of problems during the course of an average day.
Well, I'm sure all of us have experienced some of these difficulties at one time or another. How do you distinguish between a healthy person who has a normal problem and a person with a mild disability?
Everyone experiences some fluctuation in the degree of problem solving that they do. A person with a disability functioning at level 5 cannot engage in abstract problem solving. Kathy's going to demonstrate that for us, and she'll show you what that kind of problem solving looks like. With a mild disability, they don't talk and work at the same time, so I'm going to do the talking. They do a lot of fiddling around. You'll also notice from her actions that they tend to proceed in a rather ineffective and inefficient manner. They don't plan ahead. When they begin to notice that they're having some troubles, we often hear some complaints about the tools or the materials.
Do you have better scissors? Those don't seem to be cutting very good.
Here, try these.
Thank you.
Doesn't look like the new scissors seem to help very much.
No. And that's one of the things that gets to be very annoying about working with somebody with a mild disability. For the family or their supervisors, there's a lot of blaming that goes on. And a lot of blaming can get real old real fast.
Oh yeah, I bet.
Well, this didn't turn out very good, but it's all right.
As you look more carefully at the box, you'll see a lot of level 5 kinds of errors within this. The hinges aren't really all that tight.
Yeah.
The sanding doesn't really come all the way to the edge. Things are a little bit crooked. This is the best one, this along here. So that we see a lot of errors being made while people are working on things. Here are some things that are hard for the cognitively disabled to do. These kinds of instruction materials are difficult for them. Now they can read the materials and they can point to the diagrams, but they tend to just sort of sit and stare at them as if they were meaningless. They want to do the project, but they can't figure out how to follow the instructions. We can also find some familiar objects around the house that involve planning ahead besides just following instructions. For example, figuring out the budget for groceries, making out checks. All of those kinds of things involve planning ahead, which is a problem at level 5.
You've just named some of my least favorite things to do, especially the thing about the budgeting for the groceries. Does that mean I'm cognitively disabled?
No, it doesn't mean that at all. I tend to think that the human brain is very conservative in the amount of energy that we expend, and we don't put out any more than we have to.
So a person with a mild disability cannot, even though they may want to?
That's right.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
And a distinction that's very hard to make. There's a real easy tendency to blame the person with a mild cognitive disability and say that they're not trying hard enough, or to label it as a motivational question when it's really a question of a disability.
But I don't understand how you can make that distinction.
That's really one of the great values of crafts, in that when somebody is having trouble doing something, there tends to be a lot of conflict that generates in the family. And we can get around that conflict by suggesting something fun to do. We can then see what kind of problem solving a person is able to do when we don't have to deal with the motivational question. We don't have to do crafts, but crafts tend to be a great starting point to evaluate problem solving ability.
I see, the old football play.
Right.
You don't go up the center, then you go around to the end.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I think I can identify with what it's like to be functioning at level 5. Now, can you help me understand level 4?
Okay. This is the hardest level to understand, so let's start with some projects that people have seen psychiatric patients make successfully. And you'll notice from looking at these projects that we have a rather broad definition of success. Kathy's going to show us the process that the level 4s go through as they begin to do familiar things. One of our favorite activities is to have them do sanding, staining, and gluing.
What do I do now?
And that's the classic level 4 question. What do I do now, or what do I do next? Shows us that the person is goal-directed. They know that there is something next to do. On the other hand, they can't invent the next step. The same problem occurs in sequencing, and Kathy will show us what happens when a level 4 person is asked to put things in a sequence with these sequence cards. This is another way of testing problem solving that is often used. but it has some serious drawbacks. Just because she can lay the cards out in a sequence does not necessarily mean that she's going to be able to put on her shoes or ride a bike.
Oh. So a person can't always do what they say they're going to do.
Right, and when it comes to safety, we cannot have the person do anything dangerous while they're in the hospital, so that we have to see if they can sequence themselves through an activity in a way that doesn't involve a risk. Can you imagine the headlines if we did something about safety? Psychiatric patient asked to start fire. So clearly we've got to get around this and find a different way of predicting problem-solving ability within a non-risky situation. At this point, I think we could stand a figure to identify the parameters of those things that go into the evaluation that we need to do. First of all, we need to observe someone doing performance so that we can make a distinction between what they say and what they do. Then we need to have a non-risky situation for them to do the activity in. And finally, we have to have an activity that they think is interesting, that they will agree to do, or we're going to run into the motivational problem. And lastly, we have to be sure that there's no harm done to the patient. We must protect them.
So the motivation question is very important in this.
And crafts make great motivators. They serve both the therapist's needs for evaluation and the patients enjoy doing them. Now, there are other things that we can use as motivators. For example, computers are frequently used, but we actually prefer crafts over computers for several reasons. First of all, crafts are far less expensive to buy. Crafts are far more forgiving when somebody makes a mistake. And indeed, crafts offer a wider range of visual cues.
Well, I understand about the high cost of computers, but I don't understand what you mean by the wide range of visual cues. Can you give me some examples?
Sure. The things that people do not notice are our biggest concern when we begin to think about safety in the community. Many of the things that we will point out to patients that they did not do don't really make sense to them, and they don't really see a need to deal with them. It's these things, when you translate them into other objects in the community, that are apt to produce hazards for them. They also don't understand a number of things like aesthetics, and not notice, for example, the kind of dirt that's on here with the glue. It again is these kinds of things that can lead to hazards within the community.
This reminds me of small children.
Yes, and every bit as demanding to live with. However, they're apt to request the full rights of adults.
So what level of performance do they base all this on?
When we function at level 4, we tend to try to match our actions to a sample of performance.
Excuse me, when we function at level 4?
Yes. We probably all of us function at level 4 through a good portion of our day. I tend to think that the brain is pretty conservative and we don't use any more energy than we have to. And we can actually do most of our activities of daily living at level 4 in a rather habitual kind of way.
Wait a minute, so what's so disabling about level 4?
Well, it's not a problem unless that's the top of your range of ability. When level 4 is the top of the range, they can't get to level 5 and 6 problem solving.
So grooming, eating, the very basic daily activities are all done at level 4 cognitive ability. But someone who is at level 4 won't be able to do anything beyond that.
Now you're getting it.
Oh, it's great.
The problems presented by crafts can be graded to match the activities of daily living. And in OT, we call that task equivalence. The problems presented in the craft project are similar to the problems that we find in real-life situations. Our major concern is with people who do not solve these problems, and it is a lack of problem solving that can produce a danger to self or others.
So just like small children, they need to be protected.
Absolutely, with one major difference, and that is they will demand the full rights of adults.
Well, what do you do then?
Within the law, competency to manage one's own affairs assumes that one will use ordinary care, and if one does not do that, you are subject to the laws of negligence. So a person who is not able to be competent to manage their own affairs cannot protect themselves, and their legal right to manage their own affairs may be taken away.
So are you talking about a legal guardian?
Yeah.
Well, how do crafts help to make that kind of decision?
Crafts alert us of the need to take a real careful look at the activities that the patient and family intend to do. We want to check that out very carefully because therapists often see level 4 as the great foolers. Those people who have a good vocabulary and can talk very well often present a picture of being able to problem solve far better than they are able to. So that crafts tell us that we need to be very careful to provide the protection that these people may need. From a craft and problem-solving perspective, the lower cognitive levels are really very easy to understand because the quality of their performance is so poor. For example, this patient was trying to make this heart trivet.
Why were these projects even done?
Really for evaluation purposes. The therapists were hoping that they were functioning better than they actually were.
So I can assume that this is as bad as they get?
Well, below this, at levels 1 and 2, crafts really don't have any meaning for them at all.
So basically what you're saying is that the craft projects work best for the cognitively disabled levels 3 through 6?
That's right. And they're very nice because they're essentially very sensitive to problem-solving abilities within the middle of the scale.
And that, in my opinion, is the true value of this scale. It is those patients who are in the middle of the scale who are most apt to have problems functioning in the community. And knowing their cognitive level, we are then able to anticipate which activities they are apt to do in an unsafe fashion.
So crafts, utilized along with the scale, can enable the therapist to recognize cognitive disabilities which other medical technologies or approaches might not recognize? Wow, well, that really does say a lot for the worth of crafts in occupational therapy.
In a hospital setting, we rely on crafts to answer the questions that are really foremost in the patient and the family's minds. When can I get out of the hospital? When can I go home? When can I go back to work?
Well, Kathy, Claudia, thank you so much for visiting with us today. I certainly have learned a lot about the usefulness of crafts to occupational therapists. And we hope you have too. For more information on Claudia Allen's Cognitive Disability Scale and craft projects designed to interface with the Allen Scale, please contact S&S Worldwide, 75 Mill Street, Colchester, Connecticut, 06415. We hope you have enjoyed our presentation.